Okay, we are holding on page Yud Aleph of the Maimer, the 11th, the seventh page of your downloads of your copies, and we were speaking about the idea of Sheishes Yamim Te'asa Malachtecha, Te'asa Malacha, V'Yom HaShvi, Shabbos, Kodesh L'Hashem, Shabbos Shabboson. And how can the Shabbos be a real Shabbos, Shabbos Shabboson? It's if you have that during the week, it's in the way of Te'asa, that Yigia Kapecha Kisoichol Davke, that you do not have the idea of that it's we don't invest all of our brain and heart in it. We only do our work in a way of Yigia Kapecha Kisoichol. We only do it with the effort and work of our palms, and therefore, since we do it in such a way that we are not working with our brain and our heart, so when Shabbos comes, so then the Shabbos can be a true Shabbos, can be a Shabbos Shabbos, it can be a real ruchnistic Shabbos. So now, and that is also why it came after Yom Kippur, after Moshe Rabbeinu received Tzalachti Kidvarecha, because the idea that took place after Yom Kippur was the beginning or a conclusion of the tikkun on the Chet HaEgel. The Chet HaEgel, Avodah Zarah B'Dakas, is the idea that we have the believing in the Gashmis of the world, not realizing and giving the whole Inyan over to the Eibishter. So when we have the awesome malachtecha, that we realize that it's all coming from the Eibishter, that's why it's only Yigia Kapech, you're only doing it with your hands, but your head and your heart you're reserving for the Eibishter. This is something that counters the whole idea of the beginning of Avodah Zarah, where we gave importance and value to the Gashmistic sources of our chayes, like the sun, the moon, and so on. So all of what he was talking about now, that is Sheish Yom Te'asa Malachtecha, and to realize that it's all coming from Hashem and so on, we were talking about Gashmistic Parnasa, physical Parnasa. Now, the Rebbe is going to introduce this even in our Ruchnistic service of the Eibishter. We also need to have this type of appreciation and realization of how it's not coming from me, how it's all coming from the Eibishter. Hey, line 19, page Yudal. In a column, everything we spoke about before. About the Tiyos and Malachtecham, the Yigia Kapech, Yisoichal, Yesh, Megambam Locha, Ruchnis, Bavoidus Havai, is also to be found in the spiritual Avodah, in the spiritual Malacha when we're serving Hashem. The idea behind this is Kedis of a Mishnah, like it's brought down the Mishnah, Alti, you Kavodim, Amisham, Shmesarav, Manasal, Kabul Pras. Do not be like servants that serve their master for the sake of receiving a reward. El Hevik Kavodim, Amisham, Shmesarav, Shalel, Manasal, Kabul Pras, top of page base. Be like servants that serve their master, in other words, the Eibishter, not because of the reward. Meaning, Bahainu. This means as follows: in our avodas Hashem, there can be a type of avodah in such a way that he's doing it for the sake of receiving a reward. What does a reward mean? He knows and understands the good and the advantage of studying Torah and fulfilling mitzvahs. And it's felt by him the pleasantness and the sweetness and the geschmack in Torah mitzvahs, and that is why he's involved in Torah mitzvahs. So the Rebbe is like bringing up a little bit higher than what we would normally explain about the Kabul Pras. Normally, we're talking about the Kabul Pras means for Gan Eden, for Olam Haba. We're saying don't do Torah mitzvahs for the sake of Gan Eden and Olam Haba. Comes the Rebbe and says a different and a higher explanation of Pras. What is the reward that we're referring to over here? We're talking about the geschmack that he feels in Torah mitzvahs and the goodness that he realizes in Torah mitzvahs. Line 5, concerning this, Chazal said, Do not be like servants that serve the master for the sake of receiving reward. Hainu, this means the true service of the Eibishter is not because of a feeling of goodness and delight, element of Kabbalah's oil, but rather it's out of a feeling of accepting the yoke of heaven. In other words, all he wants is to fulfill the will of above, not because of his enjoyment, not because of his delight, not because of how he feels that it's something good. When the service in such a way that he's accepting the yoke of heaven, it's in a way of becoming done, as if it's automatic, in a way of toil. What does it mean, the way of toil? Like we said before, that when a person does in the physical labor, when a person does physical work, but his heart and his mind are invested in it, so it's not considered toil, because this is his interest, this is what he's about. But when a person does it in a way of b'derech hameila, it's as if it doesn't touch him, it's not part of who he is, it's not his brain, it's not his heart invested in it, it's only his power of action. When he does it in such a type of way that it's only his power of action, so then it's considered like it's toil. So now we can explain the same thing about Avodas Hashem. Ainu, line 12, the Kivin Shavoy, the Ainu, but since the avodah of this yid is not in the way that he's drawn to it because of his will and his delight and his desire, element of Kabbalah, so he's only doing it out of the acceptance of the yoke of heaven. And he's doing it in such a way as if he has no delight. He can't help himself if he enjoys it, but that's not his motivating factor. But he's doing the avodah as if he's being forced to do the avodah. Therefore, this avodah is called toil, because it's not something that he's doing out of his enjoyment. And so to Areza, it's as if the avodah is being done in an automatic way. Because with the avodah is out of feeling, in other words, his enjoyment. So so then he could think, you know why I'm successful in my avodas Hashem? It's my doing, it's my power, my energy. Because of his good talents and his good emotional attributes, his character traits. So he's studying Torah, he's giving tzedakah. But when the avodah is not out of his own feeling and his own interest, he does it. He only does it out of the acceptance of the yoke of heaven. Then he understands and he feels. He does not take like credit for it. It's not his accomplishment. It's not something that he is doing. But rather everything that is happening and everything that's being affected and occurring, so that is only by the assistance from above, by the heaven, by help from heaven. But even in such a manner that he feels that what's primary is the assistance from above. Chazal say, open up for me like the point, like of needle on the ulam, and I will open up for you like the opening of the ulam in the Beis Hamikdash. What does that mean? The person believes that his effect is in a way that he's only opening up a pinprick. And then the matter occurs automatically. How does it happen automatically? What is it, the automatic thing? Because I'm not doing anything. How did I get here? Through the assistance that he's getting from above. So since he's getting this because of the assistance from above, so therefore it's not his doing, it's Teyasa, it's just happening to him. He did a little thing, but all of a sudden the door opens up wide open. Hop to the next page, page Gimel. This approach and this type of way of doing things of even an avoidance Hashem is repairing the sin of the egel. How is that so? Like we said before, that when there was the chet egel, the tumah, the dirt of the sin of the Eitz Hadas returned. What was the sin of the Eitz Hadas? So this brings us down. We have this also in Pasuk Lagani. The Friedrich Rebbe's Pasuk Lagani. The idea of the sin of the Eitz Hadas is the idea of feeling, awareness, connecting with that taiva and that desire that prior to the Chet Eitz Hadas, there was negative, but the negative was not in such a way where he had any feeling for it, where there was any type of emotional bond or appreciation of it. But it all begins with an appreciation, even before that, of self and awareness of self and feeling that I am doing something and I am accomplishing something. Like it says in the pasuk, the woman saw that the tree was good for food. In other words, it's desirous for the eyes. The first idea, the first problem with that is the idea of feeling and awareness. Instead of being completely bottled, they have desires and they have things that they see as good, and therefore there's things that are not good. This whole idea of hergish is the beginning of where all negative things occur. What is the repair for this idea of hergish? It's avoid what a person does out of the acceptance of the yoke of heaven. It's in a way of it being done in an automatic way. In the way of toil, like we mentioned before. So it's not about my feelings and my emotions. It's only about what Hashem wants me to do. So that is the polar opposite of what Eitz Hadas is about. And Eitz Hadas was the beginning and the idea of the Chet Egel, which returned the tomb of the Eitz Hadas. So that's why when a person removes himself and his feelings from the equation, and he does it all out of Kabbalah soil, that undoes the Eitz Hadas and by extension the Chet Egel. Line 8. This is also what we find the neshamas that were in the enslavement in Mitzrayim. The Doira Palaga, they are the neshamas of the Doira Palaga of the generation that were scattered when they built the tower. Amru, that they said, let's build for ourselves a city and a tower. The repair for this was the enslavement in Mitzrayim, that they worked with mortar and bricks. In other words, just like they were building things in Klippa during the Doira Flaga, they were building things with mortar and so on. So in Mitzrayim, they were massacring it through their building with mortar and bricks. So he's going to explain what's the ruchniistic counteraction. What's the ruchniistic issue that had to be removed? The idea behind this is what was the sin of the Doira Flaga? They said, let us build a city and a tower, and we'll make for ourselves a name. Meaning, we'll make ourselves well known. Who's concerned about being well known? That's the idea when a person has a feeling of self and an awareness of self, then there's an idea of wanting to be to have a name because there's me. In other words, they're not subservient to the task. They're not immersed in the task. It's about, let me make myself famous. Just to give an analogy from something totally different. There are perhaps two types of artists, painters, for example. There's a type of painter that paints because he wants to become famous. He wants people to know his name, hang up his art in their homes, pay him a lot of money, etc. Then there's a type of artist, I've spoken to artists like these, that they are like, it's not about fame and being well known and having a lot of money, and many of them actually struggle in their lifetime, but rather it's like a feeling of I can't do anything else. This is who I am. I have to get out my feelings and my thoughts and my ideas on canvas. In other words, it's not about them and their feeling. It's like the work takes them over. And that is the issue with Hergish. Hergish is about awareness of self, seeing myself in the picture, instead of seeing what has to be done, like in the case of Torah mitzvahs. So he says further, line line 14, Vatikan Lazahu, and the repair for this is I think Golas, Vashivit Mitzrayim, through the exile and enslavement of Mitzrayim with mortar and bricks, but in a way of the breaking labor and toil. That was the opposite. That was the generation of the dispersion of the though they shared in common the Yidden and Mitzrayim and those that built the tower shared in common that they worked with mortar and bricks and they worked with mortar and bricks. Still in all, the mortar and bricks that was worked on in the Deiraf Laga and the generation of the dispersion, Mikal Malcolm their avoida was not in the way of toil, because we said before that toil is dependent on if my heart and mind are invested in it or not. They did it because they enjoyed it. They wanted the name, like we said before. Since they had a delight in it, they wanted to go up to heaven. They wanted to fight and to make war against Eibishter Chas v'Shalom. So this was their enjoyment. So what was the polar opposite of this? Doing the same type of work, but without feeling of enjoyment. Therefore, the repair for this was through the enslavement in Egypt with mortar and bricks, in a way of breaking labor. What's the idea of breaking labor or crumbling labor? It makes the body crumble and break, and so too it does it to the soul. So therefore, it's a lack of hergish, it's a lack of enjoyment and pleasure and investment of self. So too, it's when we repair the sin of the Eitz Hadas through the avoid of 6 days. Work should be done. Because the sin of the Eitz Hadas, the idea of feeling and awareness of self. Even avoidance Hashem, like we're talking about over here, is done out of his feeling that he has enjoyment and appreciation, and he understands it. So it's not a matter of toil, like we said before, because he delights and enjoys his service. It's also not in a way of chaos, in a way that's automatic. Since he thinks that his avodah is done by his own self and his own power. Therefore, the repair for this is when the person does the avodah the total opposite way. He does it out of the acceptance of the yoke of heaven. Then the avodah is no way of toil. Instead of the fact that his service was out of a way of delight. The teyasa b'derech meila, and the way that it should be done in an automatic way. How? Because he realizes this is something that is through the empowerment from above. It's not his doing. Instead of the fact that it was initially done because he felt that this was the power and the strength of my hand that's accomplishing this avodas Hashem. He took the credit for himself. Instead, he realizes that all he did just open up just a pinhole, and really the Eibishter did the rest and opened it up as wide as the 20 amas of the opening of the ulam in the Beis Hamikdash. Any questions before we go on to Ois Vav?
This is just to get us psyched for Pesach cleaning, right?
I guess you could say that way. Okay, so we're holding page Yud Daled, fourth line from the top. So now we're going to get back to the idea of this coming on the heels of Yom Kippur and the Yidden being told the malachs of Shabbos, what they're not supposed to do. Vayakil, which is called Ashbnei Yisrael, Vayemer Lehem Elad Dvarim Gomer. This is where it says that Moshe gathered all the congregation of the Bnei Yisrael. He told them these are the matters. On the morrow of Yom Kippur, when they had to remove the dirt that had come about through the sin of the Egel, which was a continuation and a re-emergence of the dirt of the Chetz Hadas. And after Yom Kippur, we had to now affect that the world should be the way it was at the beginning of the creation, before the sin of the Eitzadas. That the world was created perfect and complete. Then Moshe Rabbeinu gathered and he said that these are the matters. So we know the Koi Alamed Tes Hamalachas to Uvden the Koi. The pasuk Elad Varim comes to teach us about the 39 malachas of the mundane work of the weekday work. Where do we see this? So there's a famous drashas Chazal. How do we know the number of 39 types of prohibited labors? So he says, we learn it out from this pasuk, where it says, Eila Hadvarim, it says in Sheishes Yamim Te'asim Malacha. So the fact that it says these are the things, 6 days you should do work. The things are the 6 days that you do work. How do you see it? So I'll just say it first outside. Where do you see it from? There is Eila, is the numerical equivalent of 36. Gematria, Lamed Vav 36. Dvarim is plural. The minimum of any plural things is 2. So 2 plus 36 is 38. Hadvarim, you add the letter Hey. So then you, for the extra letter Hey, you add one more, you get to 39. So when it says, Vayakil Moshe is called Ashbnei Yisrael, and he told them, Elad Dvarim, Sheis Yom Te'asam Malacha, the Elad Dvarim is telling you how many malachas there are. It says, Gedrashas Chazal Darshan, Dvarim, Hadvarim, Elad Dvarim. Chazal do it in the backwards way than what I enumerated it. First of all, Dvarim is 2, multiple, plural. Hadvarim, you add with the Hey, you add another thing, so that's 3. And Eila Hadvarim, you have another 36. So 36 plus 3 is 39. Eila Matas Malachas, remember the Moshe Sinai, these are the 39 prohibited labor that was Moshe Rabbeinu was told on Har Sinai about the prohibitions on Shabbos. That through the 39 malachas, we are affecting the ultimate purpose in the creation and the coming and the being of the world. That Hashem desired to make a home down here below. So that's why there are 39 malachas that we do throughout the week. Because in the middle of the week, we are engaging with the world. And while we're engaging with the world with the 39 malachas, we are making a home for the Eibush down here below. In this physical and coarse world, that there's nothing lower than it. So the Rebbe goes on to explain about the general concept of dir b'tachtoin. The idea behind this is, but Tanya explained the well-known thing in Tanya, where he speaks about the idea of dir b'tachtoinim. So he speaks about in Perek Lamed Vav. We can't say that when the Medrash says that Hashem desired to have a home down here below, he means below not all the way down to below. He's talking about the spiritual worlds, the worlds of Atzilus. Why? How would you call them below? Because because in comparison to the emanator, to the Eibishter that made Atzilus, so even Atzilus is low. So therefore, maybe already in Atzilus is fulfilled the mission and the purpose that Hashem wanted to have on Dirib Tachtoin. So the Alter Rebbe explains that you cannot say that the world of Atzilus or any subsequent worlds, and we'll talk about that in detail in a moment, is going to be the Tachten for which Hashem created everything. So the Alter Rebbe says, and the Rebbe quotes the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, since their coming into being was a descent from the light of his face. So the Rebbe is going to explain what does that phrase from Perek Lamed Vav in Tanya mean. Line 21, like for example, the world of Atzilus, and the idea of Atzilus is revealing what was concealed. In other words, the spheres of Atzilus and everything else in Atzilus in general was concealed in the Ein itself before it came down into the world of Atzilus. While it was concealed, while let's say the spheres of Atzilus were part of Kesser, were part of Akudim, were part of Ak, were part of Ein itself, it's B'madrega Nalshoiser, so obviously a much higher level. Because when the revelations of godliness are drawn down below, they decrease. That's the very process of revelation, that it lessens its power and intensity than the way it was before. So therefore, that's what it means. It's impossible to say that the intention of Hashem in the creation of all the worlds was the world of Atzilus. Since it's only a level of descent. It makes no sense that they should use out a very high thing for something that's lower. Every single time when we do something, we do it for a greater gain. But let's say a person does work to be able to get money. So in his world, the money is more valuable to him and more necessary to him than the work that he is doing. You're always working, you're always doing things for something greater. You cannot say that the Eibishter is going to create a world, the purpose is something less. Hello, line 28. The goal is in the world of Bri Yitzir. And not only that, or Bri Yitzir Gufa and the worlds of Bri Yitzir itself. Of those worlds, which is the ultimate goal, where's the ultimate level of Tachten for which Hashem wanted a deer. Top of page Tezvav, this physical and coarse world that there's nothing beneath it. Because this descent is for the sake of an asset. Because in this world you have something that you wouldn't have in the world of Atzilus, for example. You gain nothing in the world of Atzilus, but in this world you gain the Kadis Kafia, Sitra Achreb, Istalik, Yekorik, Kuchablichu, when Sitra Achreb, which is found in this world, becomes sublimated and subjugated. So then the glory of the Eibishter rises up and is revealed in all the worlds. That comes down such a level that it's equal in all the worlds, like the Friedrich Rebbe says over there in the Maimon, the level of Soiviv, and even higher than that. The very essence of the Eibishter comes down through the Avodah V'Skafia. Because without the Avodah V'Skafia, just those worlds on their own, before we have V'Skafia, because when we're dealing with godly revelations, not Hashem's essence, so they become decreased in their being drawn down, like we mentioned before. Therefore, they are not equal in all the worlds because there's a decreasing in the godly light as they're going down lower and lower. And the drawing down of Hashem's essence is when their Sitra Achra is being subjugated and sublimated. Specifically, down here in this physical world is where you have that type of sublimation in this low world. So therefore, it would only make sense that the entire creation should be because of this world, not because of any of the higher worlds, because over there's no gain, there's only a loss as it's coming into being. We'll stop over here. Any questions?